My name is Michaela and I just finished playing 5 years at the University of Regina for the women's basketball team. I think mental health in sport is important because there's so many aspects that go into like playing, practicing, like having a career, quote unquote. But the one thing that people don't think about, I think the most, is mental health. And so, you know, you're constantly training, like physically, running, practicing, all that kind of stuff, but people don't ever stop and think about what's going on inside your brain. So I think it's really important for like people like you that are bringing it out, because it's not talked about enough, and I think more people experience it than say they do. Yeah, I definitely think it has. I wouldn't say that it was ever negatively impacted by actual like the game of basketball. I think that probably helped me in a positive way more than anything. But things, especially when I was playing at the university, like juggling that with the rest of my life for sure had a negative impact on it. And so I think it's not always necessarily the sport itself. I know some people experience that, but for me it was more about like time management and juggling that, which like dug me into a hole a little bit. I think it got better over my time for sure, and I think there are lots of reasons why it's become like more of something people are aware of and all of that sorts of junk. But I know at least like when I was in high school and going into my first few years, that wasn't really something people talked about. Like I couldn't probably tell you if any of my high school teammates or my first few years people were experiencing that kind of stuff, and it was always sort of pushed off as something to do with the sport rather than something that needed to be dealt with separately. So I think, again, for people like because of people like you, it's getting a lot better, but obviously tons of room for growth there. I don't feel like that was offered, no. And that's not really a knock on anybody. I don't think coaches and university staff and people that deal with our sport in other ways see that as something they also need to sort of put on their plate a little bit. So, you know, your coaches all have their specialty, and I don't think there's really very many teams that have someone to help with that. And so as an athlete, you would sort of be left out to dry, just almost like anybody else, I guess, but to find your own resources. I don't think it was provided separately because I was an athlete at all. This is an interesting question, actually, but when I think back on it, probably. Did I realize that while it was happening? Probably not, which is awful as someone who like experiences it. But I think, again, because of, you know, you're in these high stress situations, you're with each other all the time, you're constantly, you know, like in tight spaces with each other and bickering over little basketball issues and all that sort of thing. When you look back on it, I probably could have been a lot more aware and sort of helpful to my teammates in regards to their mental health, which again is probably an issue. Like teammates aren't reaching out to each other in that respect because they're unaware or too afraid. But definitely looking back on it, I see that now. Yes, this is my favorite question you're asking. Yes, absolutely. It was my biggest pet peeve probably as a basketball player. And not only because of like anxiety for me is what I struggle with the most, and which obviously I can't leave that off the court. Like that was always obvious to me, but it wasn't obvious to everybody else. And so I think for my coach, especially, and for people who weren't struggling with mental health, they thought that was a solution that they could suggest that would make this all better, when in reality, like if I could just make it go away when I walked into a different room, that would be the best life I could ever live. So it was always tough for me because I wanted to fight that one, but without coming out of everything that I felt all day every day, I couldn't. But that's my least favorite statement probably in the world. Yeah. I don't think a coach ever had a negative impact on my mental health from what they said, because like I say, I was kind of like, you know, a little bit of a psycho and wanted to play and wanted to be better. But I know for a fact that I played for quite a few coaches who didn't change their tone within my team, depending on who they were talking to. And And that would have for sure negatively affected my teammates, because once I realized that sort of like different people needed to be communicated with differently, that for sure would have affected others. Luckily, I never experienced that, just like a lack of resources more than anything from them. I think for me, it's mostly about coaches that care. Like anybody, I know a lot of coaches don't want to get into people's personal lives, and I for sure appreciate that. But rather than sort of asking me to leave my problems off the court, people that are willing to notice that I'm having maybe not the best day, and they don't even need to ask me about it, but they just need to recognize it and even leave it alone. That was like the most supportive environment I've been in from a coach, is probably that. Just like recognizing that people have bad days, understanding that as long as they're doing their job on the court and not hurting their teammates, it's fine, kind of thing. I mean, there's a billion ways I could answer that question, but I think from a mental health perspective, I want to provide that supportive environment. And I am hoping to learn that from all sorts of other coaches, but I think that just like providing a place where my door is open and girls feel that, or guys, I guess, but I know that a lot of coaches say my door is always open, but that doesn't mean they're open to conversation. And so I guess that's kind of what I'm hoping, is that people actually feel like they could walk in and ask me and talk to me, and hopefully sharing my experience can help them feel like they can do that.